you have some teaching experience, right? At BC, is that Boston College?
Yes.
Okay. Um, and you have a lot of insights about teaching as well, and I like to dig a little bit into that. I'm also curious, like whether you've taught your students this technique and how they have taken, how they took it.
I honestly don't remember because the courses I taught, the first the first course was basic. Yeah, I mean, because this was in the School of Management, and they taught computer science in the School of Management, and back then we were teaching basic, and uh, performance is the last thing on your mind. You want to just get it to do
Yeah, that's true. You need to
do it
be,
something interesting.
yeah, you need
You
to
know,
be
I
at a
would,
pretty high level before this comes into play. Yeah.
and I would get them teach them enough techniques so that they could start a project of their own design. Like one would say, well, we want to simulate sailing a sailboat. Another one would say, we want to have bank accounts for the family. Another one would say, we want to play music and show the flag going on there. These were Apple computers,
Mhm.
and uh, so if they could get that, that was great. Then the second course was Pascal, so you could start talking about data structures. I mean, you could talk about data structures sort of in BASIC, but but Pascal really had structures and upper and lower case. Oh, wait a second, did it? No, no. C had upper and lower case, but C
Oh
was a
yeah.
new thing at that time. Um, but then I moved from there to Lisp and talking about AI. Well, again, you're not concerned about performance. You're concerned about, how do you write a program that does something semi-intelligent? And
Hmm.
it never really came up. Then let's see, of course, in operating systems, were there. You're all about, how do you do files, stuff like that.
Yeah,
It didn't really come up,
I see.
but
Yeah,
but in
that
the
makes sense.
consulting, it did.
Yeah, it makes
In
sense. Yeah, if you're teaching, you're just trying to teach people how to get into programming. This is gonna come far down the road. Um, what are your biggest sort of insights or realizations about teaching?
Well, very first thing I learned was that you got to go slow. In fact, because things that seem obvious to you are not obvious to the students. Like, in teaching basic, what I found in teaching basic was that the first thing I did was write a little interpreter for a decimal computer, so I could start give about 6 weeks having the students do examples on this decimal computer where just simple things like add up a bunch of numbers or um, write a loop or add two numbers and show the result. And this computer had decimal instructions, decimal numbers in the memory. It had a memory of like 100 memory locations, and so the whole concept of a memory location as and and computers doing one step at a time, because when they ran the interpreter, there was no run button. You had to single step it.
Mm.
The
Oh, really?
simulator is written in BASIC. Point is, I want to get across. This is what computers do. They do one thing at a time, and they're really stupid. They don't read your mind. I mean, because these kids, if you hit them with BASIC, there's a statement that says if blah blah blah. Okay, they say, well, that means it knows English, and all I can do, and all I have to do is tell it in English what I want.
So are you
No,
saying that you as sort of like a construct of your teaching, you set it up so that they couldn't just run the program, that they were forced to single step it, or was that like
initially, so that they understood.
got it.
See, and
That's a really clever idea. I like it.
because you use a variable, you say x equals 3 plus y. They say, oh, okay, it must know English. You have to get them to understand that x is a memory location and y is a memory, and a memory location is something that can hold one number.
Mm-hmm.
If you say x equals 3 and then you say x equals 5, well, it's no longer 3.
Mm-hmm.
Just really, this is stuff that as a programmer, if you've been programming since you were a kid, like they are now, you don't even think that.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, yeah. From talking to my former professor Mark Gustile, uh, he told me that one of the biggest things that beginners get tripped up is the fact that you can say x equals x plus 1, and that's
Yeah,
like a mind bender for
yeah.
beginners. Like how can x be equal to x plus 1? I don't get it.
Yep, that's one. Another one is swapping A and B. If you say A equals B and B equals A, well then what? You have to have a temp.
You have to have a time. Yeah, yeah. You
And
get
I
really
illustrate
confused.
this by moving things from hand to hand. You drop something.
Yep. Yep. That's true. That's true. Nice.
But if you've been doing coding, teaching, you said. Um,
Yeah. I did some teaching for a coding boot camp in Atlanta, which is something that they take adults that want to change their career and move into software development, and they
uh,
put it into my class or one of the other instructors' class for 16 straight weeks, and then it's a boot
wow.
camp. We try to get them ready to be hired in that amount of time, and it's kind of crazy. It works some percentage of the time, um, for some percentage of the people, and I'm really proud of that work. But yeah, I sort of that dove headfirst into teaching, and yeah, like before that, I didn't really have real teaching experience, so it was just like a rude awakening, um, in a lot of respects, like in terms of what works, what doesn't work, and yeah, I definitely had the same realization of like no matter who you are, I think like well, especially if you're like skilled at some field and you never taught before and you start to teach, you're just gonna go too fast for them initially. And then hopefully you will make adjustments after that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. I mean, I was teaching kids who were freshmen and sophomores and sometimes juniors in college, and they had no occasionally somebody had a programming class in high school. Uh, so they were all pretty much at a level I could predict.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. In regards to single stepping, I use a tool called Python Tutor.
Uh-huh.
Um, so so what you do is with Python Tutor is, can you still see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so let's say you write a very simple program that is gonna sum. I'm gonna loop from 0 to 10, and then sum up the numbers. What you do is you say visualize the execution of this program, and then this is like a VCR. You can step forward or you can step backwards. And the key is you can step backwards.
A key,
And I sort of force my students to do this when they have this.
One of the things that's important in there is the indentation.
Mm.
They will not assume that, and that the indentation is important.
Oh, so yeah. The students, it takes them a while to figure out the indentation part. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and I guess for some of them, I don't know. I initially, like for the first class that I taught them JavaScript first, and then the second one that I taught, I decided to try Python first, and I found that it went much better with Python first. I think it's a combination of there's just less syntax they have to type with Python. So just having to type less means there's less chance for mistakes, especially with JavaScript or C. You have to match up the curly brackets that are kind of far apart, right? One is here, the other line is like 5 lines down. You have to match up those brackets, and they will often forget. With Python, that's not an issue because there are no brackets like that. And I think Python has much better error messages when they happen, and there's this tool, so it did go better with Python than JavaScript. JavaScript is like a famously unforgiving language.
Well, then that's important. The single stepping is important, and another thing that's important is to be able to, once you know one language, then to be able to learn a new one.
Yeah, that's true. I think Zet Shaw is a guy. He wrote a bunch of tutorials online, and he said that by the time you learn your third programming language, that then you have arrived. Yeah, so perhaps you and you probably want to like do languages that are kind of different to get a sampling of the different styles, maybe. I don't know.
Well, there are things, when, like in this case, okay, well, what's range? I don't know, I wrote it. But I found in teaching BASIC that I could get them going quite well on scalar variables, single variables. When they went to arrays, that was a big speed bump.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was the trick. There was a series of speed bumps, and arrays were one of the big ones.
Yeah, arrays, loops.
Loops were come earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, loops having to do with arrays. I probably I decided that it was more worthwhile to teach them while loops than the compacted for loop syntax, because each of the 3 parts that go into the for loop are on separate lines if you do it as a while loop, and they can be seen as a single step. Like there's the initialization goes before the while loop, and then you would do the plus counter at the end, and then the conditional is in the while loop. So I prefer to do it that way. And then, yeah, the arrays and strings, those are tricky. Yeah, there were various patterns that I gave them like sort of like a template of like, well, it's very common that if you need to do like a string, to do something to a string or to do something to an array, it's very common that you do something like this. So just follow this template and then fill in the blank. I gave them a template and they could kind of fill in the blank.
Yeah, so it sounds like you've been going through some of the same challenges that any new teacher does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've seen cases where they start off with message passing and object-oriented programming, and it's nobody's going to know what you're talking about.
Yeah, they're like, let's talk about encapsulation and polymorphism.
Yeah.
Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. Yeah, I think I don't know. It's like the Java became such a hot topic, like in the 90s for various colleges. I imagine the teachers that were trying to teach, they probably ran into some challenges back then.
Well, I still get a lot of practice doing the performance tuning, mainly because people have been taught object-oriented programming levels of abstraction. They think the more abstraction, the better. And I'm saying, well, wait a minute. You find out that that's what's taking all your time.
Yeah,
Often,
yeah, you
yeah,
mentioned that in your paper. You said like often you find that the abstraction is the thing that's causing the performance issue.
yeah. Even though people are taught to do that with the rationale that this will perform better.